Now it's time for a little pit stop, as we're calling it right now. And this is a kind of little new segment that, of course, now that we know we're going to get some action and we know a couple of you guys will definitely have some questions to throw at our experts right here, or you just might have some predictions. We know a couple of our followers on social media have already sent some in. So, boys, I'm going to get you guys to chime in on them. We've asked them for, some questions for you guys and some very bold predictions for the season, or at least this first race weekend. So I'm just going to rattle through quite a few of them. Right. So let's start off with Harry Diacono. It's a very nice last name, if it is your last name. He says Vettel to spin 4 times in Friday's practice. Nate's already laughing. Let me just rattle through a couple more. Rick Roberts wants to know what makes the Austrian Grand Prix unique from other Grand Prix. I think that's a good way to start because, Nate, you kind of alluded to it a little earlier on.
Yeah, well, 4 times is that across the first Friday practice, or is it? I suppose
in
you
Friday
include
practice
both.
1.
Wow. I mean, maybe. Who knows? I mean, let's see. I mean, he could do. He certainly has spun a lot in recent years. I thought with that surname, it might be a pro Vettel, pro Ferrari question. It sounded very Italian, the surname, unless I misheard it. And yeah, Austria, we kind of touched on it. Very quick. And Laurence has mentioned as well, high speed corners. The lap is pretty much finished as soon as it's begun. And if there's guys fighting close, we've seen some instance a few times there over the years. I think it's a very underrated circuit.
Cool. James Clevo says both Mercedes will fail and the podium will be Albon, Leclerc, Verstappen. And Ayrton, not Senna, says Max Verstappen will win, Leclerc second, and Sunday Sainz in third. George Russell actually
Sweet Carlos Sainz.
And he says George Russell does an incredible drive and finishes 11th.
Yeah, you know what? Those are all possible. As we talked about earlier, Mercedes' reliability issues do tend to haunt them in Austria. I'm not convinced that that's really a guide as to how this year's car will perform. But yeah, it's happened before. That could definitely happen again. I'm slightly mixed up on those podiums. I like the one where Albon won. That would be a great start to the season.
That'd be brilliant.
And I heard Leclerc mentioned a couple of times. So yeah, I put him down on my podium. Completely agree with that. George, you know what? I reckon he could get in the points. I'd go even further because the Williams, we know, is still going to be back at the back of the grid, but crazy race. I haven't checked the forecast in the last 24 hours or so, but I know earlier this week there was potential forecast of rain, which might help with the Vettel 4 spins, by the way. But if rain comes, a number of drivers get knocked out, there's some reliability issues. I wouldn't put it past Russell in a semi-competitive Williams that would usually be finishing around kind of 16th to creep into the points. I think he's that good.
All right, so a couple more predictions now. Kyle Go Down says Danny Ricciardo to finish in the top 5. A Williams driver will beat a Haas driver. He's not specified though, and both Red Bulls will beat both Mercedes.
Oh, those
That's
got
some
more.
Very bold predictions.
Those got bolder the further on you got.
Yeah.
A little bit like me when I look over pictures of my life. Just before one of you guys jumped in with that, I thought I would. I like all of those predictions. The Red Bull Mercedes one would be amazing if that did happen. Haas being beaten by Williams, we saw that happen a few times last year. Haas slid all the way back to the back end of the grid by the end of last season. And I think there's a big question mark over that team this year. And there was a third one there that was... Oh, it was Ricciardo in the top 5, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's being pretty optimistic about Renault. I don't think... I think Ricciardo's good enough for that. I'm not sure if the car, at that circuit where it relies so much on power, I don't think you're going to see a Renault do that well.
I'm just still scrolling down, and some of these are actually quite bold. That's why I was laughing. But here's a question from Safal. He says, will Mercedes be using DAS in this race? Has any other team copied so far since it's legal?
Yeah, it is legal for this year. It's not legal for next year. And that really put the rest of the teams off putting any development kind of money behind it or development time behind it. So as far as we know, no other team's going to have it. Will Mercedes use it? Well, I suspect they will, but there was this big question ahead of Australia whether they will. And the question that's tied to that is whether the other teams are going to protest it. Because there's still some suggestions that they might be against even this year's regulations. I think Mercedes is pretty confident that it's not, and I think they may well intend to use it early on, just to make sure of that and get that out of the way, even if it's not a track where they need it. I think one of the key elements of it is tyre conditioning, especially behind the safety car and stuff like that. So if you get situations like that, then I suspect we might see them use it But yeah, that will be interesting. But the really interesting bit is whether the other teams protest and whether that protest is successful, because the risk there for Mercedes, of course, is that imagine if they get chucked out, if they win this race 1-2 or whatever, and then the other teams protest DAS and they get kicked out and they lose all those points and have to do the rest of the season without DAS and also starting on the back foot. That would be fascinating. So there's still some big questions around it, but I suspect Mercedes may trial it, at least in practice, make sure it's doing what they hoped, and then they'll use it if they need it in the race. And I suspect if it gets protested, it will probably be found to be legal.
Yeah, see,
Laurence loves when everything kicks off.
They'd have less time to make up lost ground, Laurence. You see, you kind of vindicated my earlier argument.
Yeah, but if any other car is found to be illegal, they will also have less time to be.
Yeah, exactly, because there's less.
Yeah, but I don't think that. I think the fundamental issue is that these cars are not competitive.
Just for the sake of it. Sorry.
All right, here's one from Darren M. Carden. He says Seb will win, or he'll have a complete tantrum and walk home from the track.
I'm not sure if under the regulations, like what the rules are around walking home to the track. Like,
when someone's having a tantrum, sometimes it's best to just let them be.
Yeah.
As long as he puts his mask on, then he can probably just walk home from the track. It might not be safe for him, but hey.
It's a long walk to Switzerland, though.
I was gonna
Yeah.
Hilly as well.
K Special says Hamilton and Bottas will both have their steering wheels come loose from the columns, and they will literally just let Jesus take the wheel.
I thought you were going to sing that as
Jesus take the wheel.
There we go. That's better. I mean, I don't want that. It sounds quite dangerous, but I'd love to see that as a meme. You know, I'm not saying I want them to crash, but that would be that would work as a meme.
That would be very, very interesting. Here's a question from F. Macefield. He says, I would like to know if you think Sebastian Vettel should take a sabbatical after this season. Oh, it's 2 questions in one. And then who do you think will win the Norris versus Ricciardo battle next year?
I think Sebastian might not just be looking at a sabbatical, but the end of his F1 career. If I don't think he gets a seat next year, can't really see something opening up beyond that, because the other teams have had opportunities to sign him. Ferrari obviously could have kept him if they wanted to, and they could have agreed a deal with him that made sense to him. Mercedes,
so it'll be a forced sabbatical.
Yeah, so Mercedes could have had him on board. McLaren could have had him on board. Red Bull could still have him on board if they wanted to, but they've kind of made it clear that they don't. So if he doesn't get a drive for next year, I reckon that's it. And then the Ricciardo Norris one is really, really interesting. I think it's a good battle. I think we're going to see Norris really kind of come into his own with a bit of experience behind him. But I still think Ricciardo over the course of a whole season would have the edge in that pairing, certainly in the first year that they're together.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube, and for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app, and for premium content plus live streaming, make sure to subscribe to ESPN Player.